What's wrong with your face? Who did this to you? I fell. The morning sun barely touched the floors of the mansion when Jin-seo Park descended the grand staircase. His footsteps were silent, calculated, like everything else about him. At 34, he built an empire that made men twice his age bow their heads in respect and fear. His tailored black suit held no creases. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his expression revealed nothing. But something was off today. Maya stood in the corner of the main hall, her back turned, shoulders hunched as she arranged fresh flowers in the crystal vase. Her usual grace was missing, replaced by stiff, hurried movements. Maya, his voice cut through the silence like a blade. She flinched. In the 6 months she'd worked here, he'd never seen her do that. "Good morning, Mr. Park," she said without turning around. Her voice sounded strained, tight. Jin-seo's eyes narrowed. He crossed the room in 5 long strides and positioned himself where he could see her face. That's when he saw it. A dark crimson stain marked her left cheekbone, partially hidden beneath makeup that hadn't quite done its job. Her bottom lip was swollen on one side, and when she finally met his gaze, he saw something that made his blood run cold. "What happened to your face?" "I fell. Last night. It's nothing really." She turned back to the flowers, her hands trembling so badly that a white lily slipped from her fingers and tumbled to the floor. Jin-seo didn't move. He'd interrogated enough people to know a lie when he heard one. But this wasn't business. This was Maya, the woman who hummed old soul songs while she cleaned, who left sticky notes with terrible jokes on his coffee maker, who somehow made this cold mansion feel less empty. "Look at me." It wasn't a request. Maya's hand stilled. Slowly, she turned and he saw the full extent of it. Not just the blood stain, but the finger-shaped bruises peeking out from beneath her collar, the way she held her left arm close to her body. The defeat in her brown eyes that no amount of pride could hide. "Everyone out," he said quietly. His 3 guards positioned at various points in the room exchanged glances but obeyed without question. The heavy doors closed with a soft thud. "Park, please. I need this job. I promise it won't happen again. I'll cover it better." Maya's lips pressed together. A single tear escaped down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly as if crying was something shameful. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." Those 4 words hung in the air between them. Jin-seo hadn't meant to say them with such intensity, but there they were, raw and honest. Maya's shoulders began to shake. Then like a dam breaking, everything poured out. "His name is Derek. We've been together for 2 years. He wasn't always like this. I swear. After my ex-husband left, Derek helped with bills with my daughter. But then he started controlling everything. Where I go, who I talk to, how I spend money. Last night, I told him I got a raise here, and he said I was probably sleeping with you to get it when I defended myself. Her voice cracked. "I have an 8-year-old daughter, Mr. Park. He knows where she goes to school. He said if I ever left him or told anyone, he'd make sure I never saw her again." Jin-seo's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. A cold rage settled over him. The kind that made him dangerous. The kind that had built his reputation. But when he spoke, his voice was surprisingly gentle. "Does Arya know? I always make sure she's asleep before things get bad. Where is she now?" "My neighbor watches her in the mornings before school." Jin-seo pulled out his phone and made a call. "Taehyun, send 2 men, too." He glanced at Maya, who whispered in address. "Send 2 of our best discreet protection detail for an 8-year-old girl and her guardian. No one approaches them without clearance." Maya's eyes went wide. "Park, you don't have to. What's Derek's full name and address? I can't ask you to get involved in my mess. You've been nothing but kind to me, and I won't drag you into Maya." He stepped closer, and she instinctively stepped back until her spine hit the wall. But he didn't crowd her. Instead, he maintained just enough distance to feel safe, while making sure she heard every word. "I'm already involved. The moment you walked through my door with his marks on you, I became involved. Now give me his information, or I'll find it myself. Your choice is only whether you help me or not." She told him everything. Derek Brooks lived in a rundown apartment complex on the east side, the kind of place where people minded their business because asking questions got you hurt. He was a shift manager at a warehouse, played cards on weekends, and had a reputation for talking big. When Jin-seo and 2 of his men arrived at 8 p.m. that evening, Derek was home. They could hear his television through the thin walls. Jin-seo knocked once, twice. The door swung open, and Derek stood there in a stained tank top and basketball shorts, a beer in his hand. He was 6 feet 2 inches, broad-shouldered with the kind of build that intimidated normal people. Yeah, the hell do you want? Gene Co smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Derek Brooks, we need to talk about Maya. Derek's expression changed from irritation to recognition to fear in the span of 3 seconds. Everyone in this city knew Gene Co Park's face, even if they'd never met him. Look, man, I don't want any trouble. Whatever she told you. She told me you put your hands on her multiple times. She told me you threatened her daughter. Gene Co's voice was conversational, almost friendly. That's what made it terrifying. Now, I'm going to give you 2 options, and I suggest you choose carefully. Derek tried to puff up his chest. You can't come here threatening me. I got rights. I'll call the cops. One of Gene Co's men chuckled darkly. Option 1. Gene Co continued as if Derek hadn't spoken. You never speak to Maya again. Forget she exists. If I hear you've even driven down her street, what happens next will be the last mistake you ever make. And option 2. Gene Co's smile widened. There is no option 2. I just wanted you to feel like you had a choice. Derek's hand tightened around his beer bottle. For a moment, it looked like he might try something stupid. Then, reality set in. This wasn't some woman he could bully. This was Gene Co Park, and the 2 men flanking him looked like they ate guys like Derek for breakfast. Fine, whatever. She wasn't that good anyway. Gene Co's hand shot out faster than Derek could blink, gripping his throat and slamming him against the door frame. The beer bottle shattered on the ground. See, we have the taken. Let me be crystal clear, Gene Co said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. If you ever speak about her like that again, I won't send warnings. I won't have conversations. I'll erase you from existence so thoroughly that people will forget you ever lived. Do we understand each other? Derek nodded frantically, his face turning red. Gene Co released him and stepped back, smoothing his jacket as if nothing had happened. Enjoy your evening, Derek. 3 hours later, Gene Co pulled up to Maya's small apartment. The lights were on in the second-floor unit. He'd texted her that he was coming, didn't want to frighten her. She opened the door before he could knock. Still in her work clothes, her face scrubbed clean of makeup, the injuries looked worse without it. Did you? He won't bother you again. I made sure of it. Maya's hand flew to her mouth and fresh tears spilled over. But these were different. These were relief. Thank you, God. Thank you so much. I don't know how I can ever repay you. Don't need to repay me, but we need to talk about your living situation. This apartment complex doesn't have security, and your locks are substandard. I have a property about 10 minutes from here. 3 bedrooms, gated community, security system. It's empty. You and Arya should move there. Park, I can't accept that. I can't afford. It's part of your employment package. Consider it a housing benefit. Maya laughed through her tears, a sound that hit him square in the chest. You're making that up completely. But you'll still accept it because you're smart enough to know it's the right choice for Arya. Before Maya could respond, a small voice came from behind her. Mama, who's at the door? A little girl appeared clutching a stuffed rabbit. She had her mother's eyes and a halo of curly hair pulled into 2 puffs. She looked at Gene Co with open curiosity rather than fear. Arya, baby, this is Mr. Park. He's Mama's boss. You're really tall, Arya observed. Gene Co found himself crouching down to her level, something he'd never done for anyone. You're very observant. What's that mean? It means you notice things. That's a good quality. Arya beamed. Mama says I notice too much sometimes. Your mama is very smart. Are you the reason those nice men were at my school today? Ms. Garcia said they were making sure I was safe. Gene Co glanced up at Maya, who was watching them with an expression he couldn't quite read. I wanted to make sure you and your mama are always safe. Like a superhero, something like that. Arya considered this seriously. You can stay for dinner if you want. We're having spaghetti. Mama makes the best spaghetti. And that's how Gene Co Park, one of the most feared men in the city, found himself sitting at a cramped kitchen table eating slightly overcooked spaghetti while an 8-year-old told him about her science project on butterflies. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Maya and Arya moved into the apartment Gene Co provided. It was in a safe neighborhood with good schools. And for the first time in years, Maya slept through the night without jumping at every sound. She still worked at the mansion. But things were different now. Gene Co found excuses to be wherever she was working. They'd talk, not boss and employee, but two people discovering each other. One night, long after everyone else had left, Maya found Jin Seo in his study, staring at an old photograph. "You're still here." "Ah," he said without looking up. "I could say the same to you." He turned the photograph toward her. It showed a beautiful Korean woman holding a young boy's hand, both of them smiling. "My mother," he said quietly. "She died when I was 12. My father killed her." Maya's breath caught. "Jin Seo, I'm so sorry." He set the photo down carefully. She was everything good in this world, and he destroyed her because she tried to leave him, because she tried to take me somewhere safe. Maya moved closer, her heart breaking for the boy he'd been. "That's why you helped me." "Partly." He looked up at her then, his dark eyes vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "But mostly because you matter to me, Maya. More than you should. More than is safe for either of us." She reached out, touching his face gently, her thumb tracing along his cheekbone. "You saved me. You saved Arya. We saved each other." He leaned into her touch, and something shifted between them. The careful distance they'd maintained for weeks crumbling in the space of a heartbeat. When he kissed her, it was soft, tentative, asking permission with every second. Maya melted into it, her hands gripping his shirt as if he might disappear. But happiness in Jin Seo's world was never simple. For weeks after their first kiss, Derek resurfaced. He'd been drinking with his friends, working up courage and rage in equal measure. He'd been humiliated, threatened, forced to slink away like a coward. His pride couldn't take it, so he waited outside Arya's school with two of his buddies, planning to grab the girl and force Maya to come back to him. They never got close. Jin Seo's security detail saw them the moment they approached the school grounds. Within minutes, Derek and his friends were restrained. Arya was whisked away to safety, and Jin Seo received a phone call that made his blood turn to ice. He found Maya at the school holding a sobbing Arya, both of them surrounded by his men. "He tried to take her," Maya gasped when she saw him. "He actually tried to take my baby." Jin Seo knelt in front of them, his usual composure cracking. "She's safe. You're both safe. I promise you this ends tonight." "Where is he being held?" "Waiting for me." Maya grabbed his arm. "Don't kill him, please. I don't want that on your conscience because of me. He tried to kidnap your daughter." "I know, but there are other ways. Legal ways. Your connections can make sure he goes to prison, right? Not just a slap on the wrist." Jin Seo studied her face, seeing the strength beneath the fear. She wasn't asking for him to let Derek go. She was asking him to be better than his worst instincts. "For you," he said finally. "Only for you." Derek Brooks was arrested that night. With Jin Seo's connections and resources, the DA had an airtight case within 48 hours. Assault, attempted kidnapping, stalking, violation of a restraining order. Jin Seo had helped Maya file. Derek would spend the next 8 years behind bars. But the incident had consequences beyond Derek's fate. Taehyun, Jin Seo's second-in-command and cousin, confronted him 2 days later in his office. "The men are talking," Taehyun said without preamble. "About you and the maid. Her name is Maya. Her name doesn't matter. What matters is that you're compromised, making decisions based on emotion rather than logic. Putting organization resources toward a personal matter." Jin Seo's eyes went cold. "Are you questioning my leadership?" "I'm questioning your judgment. This woman and her child have made you soft. What happens when our enemies realize that? When they see you have a weakness they can exploit, then I'll handle it like I've handled everything else by going to war over a woman. Hang, think about what you're doing. She's not one of us. She doesn't understand this life. And that little girl, careful," Jin Seo warned, his voice dropping dangerously low. "Be very careful about what you say next." Taehyun ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm trying to protect you. Protect what we've built. Your father would never have. My father was a monster who beat my mother to death. If you're using him as a moral compass, we have bigger problems than my relationship with Maya." The room fell silent. Taehyun's jaw worked, but no words came out. "I make my own choices," Jin Seo continued. "I always have. Maya and Arya are under my protection, and they will remain so. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave. That includes you, cousin." Taehyun stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I hope you know what you're doing." "So do I." 6 months later, everything had changed. Maya no longer worked as a maid. Jin Seo had discovered she had a business degree she'd never been able to use. So he put her in charge of managing his legitimate enterprises, restaurants, real estate, import businesses. She was brilliant at it, bringing an organization and attention to detail that impressed even his most skeptical associates. Arya thrived. She called Jean Co. Uncle Jean and had started taking taekwondo lessons that he insisted on personally supervising. He was surprisingly patient with her, never raising his voice, always encouraging. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, the three of them were at the park. Arya was on the swings, pumping her legs and laughing as she went higher and higher. "She's fearless," Jean Co. observed, watching her. "She gets that from you," Maya said, leaning into his side. "From me. You taught her it's okay to be strong, that she doesn't have to make herself small to make others comfortable. That's a gift." Jean Co. was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Maya's breath stopped. "I know it's fast," he said, turning to face her fully. "I know we've been through hell to get here. I know my world is dangerous and complicated and not what you probably imagined for yourself." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "But I also know that I've never felt more human than I do when I'm with you and Arya. You make me want to be better. You make me believe I can be better." Tears streamed down Maya's face. "Maya Thompson, will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and when he kissed her, Arya's delighted shriek carried across the playground. "Mama's getting married. Uncle Jean is going to be my uncle for real." They laughed, pulling Arya into their embrace, the three of them forming a unit that 6 months ago would have seemed impossible. That night, after Arya was asleep, Maya and Jean Co. sat on the balcony of the mansion under the stars. "Are you scared?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "But not of you. I'm scared I'll wake up and this will all be a dream. That I'll be back in that old apartment, afraid and alone." "You're never going to be alone again. That's my promise to you. You've already kept so many promises." "Then what's one more?" "I love you, Jean Co. Park." "I love you, Maya Thompson." Soon to be Maya Park. They stayed there until dawn broke over the city. Two people who'd found each other in the darkest circumstances and chosen to build something beautiful from the ashes. Because sometimes the person who seems most dangerous is actually the one who will protect you the fiercest. Sometimes love finds you when you've stopped looking for it. And sometimes the best endings come from the worst beginnings. Thank you so much for watching this story. If you enjoyed it and haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next emotional tale. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I love hearing from you all around the world. See you in the next. 1 year after their engagement, Maya stood in the penthouse office that had become her second home, reviewing quarterly reports when Sandra burst through the doors without knocking. "Maya, we have a problem. The Kawamura family just declared war on Jean Co. They're claiming he's gone soft, that his marriage to you makes him vulnerable. They want to test that theory." Maya's blood ran cold. "Where is he?" "In a meeting with the City Planning Commission. He doesn't know yet." Sandra's face was grim. "There's more. They've been watching Arya's school. Our security detail spotted 3 of their men yesterday." Maya's hands shook as she reached for her phone. "We need to get Arya somewhere safe. Now." "Already done." Jean Co.'s contingency plans kicked in the moment our people identified the threat. "Arya's with our most trusted team at the safe house upstate. She thinks it's a surprise weekend adventure." Relief flooded through Maya, followed immediately by fierce determination. "What else?" "The Kawamuras are hitting our legitimate businesses. The restaurant in Chinatown was firebombed this morning. No casualties, but the message was clear. They're forcing Jean Co. to respond." Maya closed the reports she'd been reading and stood up. "Then we respond. But we do it smart. Give me everything we have on their operations. Financial records, property holdings, business partnerships. If they want to play dirty, we'll bury them in lawsuits and regulatory investigations before Jean Co. has to spill a single drop of blood." Sandra raised an eyebrow. "You're thinking like him now." "I'm thinking like his partner. There's a difference. I won't let them destroy what we've built because they think love makes us weak." Maya spent the next 6 hours coordinating a response that would have impressed Jean Co.'s father, if he'd been the kind of man worth impressing. She contacted federal investigators about suspicious financial activities, reached out to immigration services regarding questionable employment practices, and arranged for building inspectors to suddenly take a very close look at Kawamura properties. When Jean Co. finally returned to the office at midnight, he He found Maya still at her desk, surrounded by files and legal documents. "You've been busy," he said, noting the controlled chaos. Maya looked up, and he saw steel in her brown eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. "They made a mistake, Gene. They assumed I was your weakness. But partnerships make people stronger, not weaker." She handed him a folder. "By tomorrow morning, the Kawamuras will be drowning in legitimate legal troubles. Their cash flow will be frozen, their properties will be under investigation, and their political connections will be running for cover. All completely legal, all completely devastating." Gene opened the folder, scanning the documents. When he looked up, there was something close to awe in his expression. "You did all this in 6 hours. I told you once that you made me want to be better." Maya stood and moved around the desk to face him. "You make me want to be stronger. They want to test our partnership. Let them. But they're going to learn that two people who trust each other completely are more dangerous than any army." He pulled her into his arms, and when he kissed her, it was with the fierce pride of a man who'd found his equal. The Kawamura family discovered Maya's handiwork over the following week. Federal agents raided their main warehouse on Monday. Immigration services descended on their restaurants Tuesday. The IRS froze their accounts Wednesday. By Thursday, 3 of their city council allies had publicly distanced themselves from the family. By Friday, Old Man Kawamura himself was calling for a meeting. Gene agreed to meet at a neutral location, a private dining room in one of the city's most exclusive hotels. Maya insisted on coming. "This started because of me," she said when Gene tried to object. "I'm finishing it." But when they arrived at the hotel, it became clear the meeting was a trap. The Kawamuras had brought twice as many men as agreed upon, and the tension in the room was explosive. "Kawamura-san," Gene said calmly as they took their seats. "I hope you've had time to reconsider your position." The old man, weathered and gray but still radiating authority, studied Maya with undisguised contempt. "You bring your woman to a business meeting." Gene expression didn't change, but every man in the room felt the temperature drop. "I bring my partner. There's a difference." Maya spoke before Kawamura could respond. "Mr. Kawamura, I understand you're concerned about Gene commitment to this life. Let me put those concerns to rest." She pulled out her phone and placed it on the table. "With 3 phone calls, I can have federal marshals here within 10 minutes. With 3 more, I can ensure your grandson's scholarship to Columbia gets revoked. His daughter's green card application gets denied. Your nephew's medical license gets suspended pending investigation." Kawamura's eyes narrowed. "You're threatening my family. I'm promising to protect mine." Maya's voice was steady, but Gene could see the fire burning behind her eyes. "You wanted to test whether love made us weak. You found out it made us methodical." The room fell silent. Finally, Kawamura began to laugh, a sound like grinding stone. "You chose well, Park. This woman understands power. I withdraw my challenge. Your territory remains yours. But remember, some of us are watching. Some of us remember what this life demands." After the Kawamuras left, Gene and Maya sat alone in the private dining room. "You realize what you just did?" he said quietly. "I stood up for my family." Maya met his gaze steadily. "All of it. You, Arya, the legitimate businesses, the people who work for us. That's what family means." That night, back at the mansion, they found Arya in the living room, building an elaborate castle out of blocks while Taehyun read her a story. "Uncle Taehyun was telling me about princesses who fought dragons," Arya announced when she saw them. "He says some princesses are scarier than dragons." Taehyun looked up at Maya with something that might have been respect. "I was wrong about you," he said simply. "You're exactly what this family needs." Maya smiled. "I'm exactly what this family deserves." 6 months later, on a crisp October morning, Maya stood before a mirror in the mansion's master bedroom, adjusting her wedding dress. It was elegant but simple, ivory silk that flowed like water. Arya, resplendent in a blue flower girl dress, bounced excitedly nearby. "Mama, you look like a real princess. You look pretty perfect yourself, baby girl." Maya knelt to Arya's level. "Are you ready for this? Are you ready to officially become Uncle Jin's family?" Arya threw her arms around Maya's neck. "I've been ready forever." The ceremony took place in the mansion's garden, transformed with white roses and soft lighting. The guest list was small but meaningful, close associates who'd become something like family, a few neighbors from Maya's old building who'd helped during the hardest times, and most importantly, Maya's mother, healthy and radiant after successful treatment. When Maya walked down the aisle, Jin Seo's breath caught. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was his partner, his equal, his home. The vows they'd written were simple but profound. "I promise to stand with you," Maya said, her voice carrying across the garden. "In legitimate businesses and shadowy dealings. In moments of peace and times of war. In the choices that make us better and the ones that simply make us survive. I promise to be your partner in all things, always." Jin Seo's vows were shorter, but no less meaningful. "I promise to protect what we've built," he said. "Not just with violence, but with wisdom. Not just with fear, but with love. I promise to be worthy of the trust you've given me, and to never forget that the strongest thing I possess isn't my reputation or my power. It's your hand in mine." When they kissed, Aria's cheer rang out over the assembled crowd, and even Taehyun was seen wiping his eyes. The reception was held in the mansion's main hall, the same room where Jin Seo had first seen the bruises on Maya's face. Now it was filled with laughter and music, the kind of joy that transforms spaces. As the evening wound down, Maya found herself on the balcony where she and Jin Seo had shared so many quiet conversations. He joined her there, loosening his tie, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "No regrets?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "About marrying the scariest man in the city?" She leaned back against his chest. "Only that it took us so long to get here." They stood there watching the city lights, two people who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to build something luminous. From inside, they could hear Aria's laughter as she danced with Taehyun, and Maya smiled. "This is what happiness sounds like," she murmured. "This is what home feels like," Jin Seo replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. 2 years later, Maya Park stood in the boardroom of their newest acquisition, a chain of community health clinics that would provide affordable care throughout the city. She was pregnant with their first child together, a son they'd already decided to name after Jin Seo's mother's maiden name. The legitimate side of their empire had grown exponentially, while the shadowy elements had become more strategic, more surgical. They'd learned to wield influence instead of violence, to build rather than simply protect. Arya, now 10, attended a private school where she excelled in every subject and had started a club for kids whose parents worked in what she diplomatically called complicated jobs. She was fierce and funny and utterly unafraid, a reflection of both her mother's strength and Jin Seo's protection. Taehyun had become not just an ally but a true friend, someone who understood that power shared was power multiplied. He'd even started dating a prosecutor, much to everyone's amusement. The old tensions within the organization had largely dissolved, replaced by a grudging respect for what Jin Seo and Maya had built together. That evening, as Maya reviewed contracts in the study, Jin Seo found her there, just as he had so many times before. But now, instead of the careful distance of early courtship or the passionate intensity of new love, there was something deeper. Contentment. Partnership. The quiet satisfaction of two people who'd not only survived their circumstances, but transformed them. "You're working late again," he observed, settling into the chair beside her desk. "Someone has to make sure our son inherits an empire worth having," she replied, resting a hand on her growing belly. "Our daughter, you mean?" Maya laughed. "We'll see about that. Either way, they're going to inherit something we never had." "What's that?" "The knowledge that love doesn't make you weak. It makes you unstoppable." Jin Seo reached across the desk to take her hand, the simple gold band on her finger catching the lamplight. "Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is let someone see who you really are beneath all the armor and reputation. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust someone enough to let them stand beside you in the darkness. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find someone who doesn't just accept the monster and the man, but helps you become something better than either." Maya squeezed his hand, feeling their baby move beneath her heart, hearing Aria's voice carrying down the hallway as she practiced her presentation for school. This was what they'd built from ashes and blood and broken pieces. Not just an empire, but a legacy. Not just survival, but transformation. Not just love, but the kind of partnership that changes everything it touches. Outside, the city hummed with its endless energy, full of people struggling and surviving and occasionally finding each other in the darkness. And in the mansion that had once been cold as marble, a family that had been forged in fire continued to write its story, one choice at a time, one day at a time, one act of love at a time. Because sometimes the best endings are really just the beginning of something even more beautiful. And sometimes the most dangerous people in the world are the ones who've learned that love isn't a weakness to exploit, but a strength that can't be broken. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more tales of love conquering all. Drop a comment and let me know what you thought about Maya and Jin Seo's journey from their first meeting to building an empire together. Which moment was your favorite? And remember, real love doesn't ask you to change who you are. It inspires you to become who you're meant to be. See you in the next story.